Welcome to Mike Shamari's Music Collection. This is the third episode devoted to debut albums by decade. This time, we're in the 1980s. There are a baker's dozen debut albums awaiting us, so let's begin. The first 1980s debut album is from the first year of the decade, Dan Siegel's Night Ride in 1980. This is another album that I originally bought on LP before it became available on CD and was released digitally by Dan when the Inner City Records copyright expired a couple of years ago. I first bought the LP in June 2005, around the time that I interviewed Dan for the Mike Shamari Show on web radio WCWP, and I was building my Dan Siegel collection. I bought the CD a few years ago, 6 years after it became available, along with Dan's second album, The Hot Shot, which I talked about in my first video. There are 9 tracks, and I like them all, but my favorite is the last track, The Broadside. John Clemmer is featured on tenor sax on Bad Habit, while Lee Ritenour has guitar solos on Looking Back and Funkin'. Gary Hagberg plays guitar otherwise. There's also Rob Thomas, no relation, on bass, and Gary Hobbs on drums and percussion. All trumpet and flugelhorn on the album was played by Bart Bartholomew. After a couple of years with the Jeff Lorber Fusion, Kenny G launched his solo career with Kenny G in 1982. Jeff Lorber co-produced Kenny's debut album along with Mecco Monardo. He also played keyboards on every track and the Linn drum machine on one of my favorite tracks, The Shuffle. John J.R. Robinson played actual drums on the rest of the album. The Mac Man, Marlon McClain, was on guitar and Steve Foreman played percussion. Bass was split between Jimmy Haslip, who's part of the latest incarnation of the Jeff Lorber Fusion, and Neil Stubbenhaus. Besides The Shuffle, my other favorites are Stop and Go, Come Close, and a pair of covers, Mercy, Mercy, Mercy by Cannonball Adderley, and I Can't Tell You Why by the Eagles. Debut album number 3 has another eponymous title, Special Effects by Special Effects in 1984. The late percussionist George Ginda founded the band along with guitarist Chieli Minucci. The album was recorded in 1982 when the band was known as Special Delivery. My favorite tracks are Sambuca Nights, Much Too Soon, Foggy Streets of London, Safari, and Waiting, which would be reprised on Chieli Minucci's Got It Going On solo album in 2005. Another 1984 debut album was put out by saxophonist Richard Elliott, and he called it Initial Approach. It was first issued on LP, then made its way to CD in 1987. I incorrectly assumed that was the original release year, making it his second album after Troll Town. I learned the truth in 2014 after hearing a SiriusXM Watercolors DJ say it was the 30th anniversary of Richard's solo debut. Richard had been with Yellow Jackets for their first 2 albums, Yellow Jackets and Mirage à Trois, and his former bandmate Robin Ford plays guitar on the last track, Capricorn. The rest of the album features Carl Verheyen on guitar. Besides Capricorn, I also like Sail Away, Take Me Away, Sarah, and a Tom Scott cover, Come Closer Baby, one of a few tracks to feature Richard on Lyricon. The third debut album by a saxophonist on this list is Najee's Theme by Najee in 1986. Among the tracks on the album are the title track, which features the Play It Najee background vocal. And then there's Betcha Don't Know, What You Do to Me, For the Love of You, not a cover of the Isley Brothers, Can't Hide Love, which is a cover of Earth, Wind & Fire, and Sweet Love, an Anita Baker cover. Also in 1986, guitarist Russ Freeman launched the Rippingtons with their debut album, Moonlighting. It was put out by GRP, but my copy is an import from Passport Jazz. The artists on the album include David Benoit, Greg Karukas, whose debut we'll get to shortly, Steve Reed, Tony Morales, Brandon Fields, Dave Koz, and Kenny G. Every track is a gem, making it hard to pick a favorite. I will point out that Mirage was redone on the Benoit Freeman project, David and Russ's collaborative effort, in 1994. And I have a funny story about She Likes to Watch. In talking up the song one time on WCWP, after noting the title, I added, and you like to listen. So it was, She Likes to Watch, and you like to listen. It was my attempt at a segue, and I had no clue of the double meaning it implied, but Joe Manfredi, the director of operations, did. I was unaware of this Freudian slip until he talked about it at the station dinner a couple of years later. I mentioned Greg Karukas had a debut album of his own, and it was The Night Owl in 1987. I have a reissue Greg sold through his website, Karukas.com, which I bought around the time I interviewed him on WCWP, as I did with Dan Siegel. It's a recurring expression, but I like all the tracks. My favorites are Drive Time, Elena, Calypso Dance, and Talbot Street Cafe. The lone vocal track, Lady in My Heart, features Jeff Passetto, who sang the DuckTales theme song. The fourth saxophonist on this 80s debut list is Gerald Albright, who debuted the same year as Greg Karukas with Just Between Us. The big hit from this album, and a favorite of mine, is Gerald's cover of Luther Vandross's So Amazing. Other standouts are the title track, King Boulevard, and Come Back to Me. The third 1987 debut is by Acoustic Alchemy, the band led by Greg Carmichael and Nick Webb on acoustic guitars, naturally. The name of their debut album is Red Dust and Spanish Lace. Again, I'll quickly list my favorites: Mr. Chow, Ricochet, The Rideout, Girl with a Red Carnation, One for the Road, and the title track, which is the longest track on the album, clocking in at 8 minutes and 47 seconds. Saxophonist number 5 and number 10 on this 80s debut list overall is Nelson Rangel, whose debut offering was To Begin Again in 1988. Like Night Ride, I have this on both LP and CD. Unlike Night Ride, both were available, but the LP was cheaper in 2007 when I was filling out my Nelson Rangel collection, so I opted for that. Around the time that I bought Night Ride on CD, I also found To Begin Again at a decent price on CD on eBay, so now I have both formats. My favorite tracks are New Country, Heroes, Draw the Line, and 2 compositions by Nelson's New England Conservatory friend Jay Rowe, A Little Sweetness, where Nelson plays flute, and I Hope We Meet Again, where he plays alto sax, which is what he plays on most of the album. He opts for soprano on What a Heart Feels and goes with piccolo on the title track, which is also known as The Island on David Benoit's Letter to Evan. Nelson covers A House Is Not a Home and would reprise that cover on his Destiny album in 1995. Keeping with saxophone, and in 1988, we have Eric Marienthal and his debut, Voices of the Heart. Eric joined the Chick Corea Electric Band the year before, and Chick played a role in 4 of the tracks, including his composition, Blue Space. Other Electric Band mates on Voices of the Heart are Frank Gambale, who plays guitar on Being With You, and John Patitucci throughout the album on bass. Other tracks include the title track, Tippin', Harvest Dance, Written in the Wind, Someone Said, and Walk! Like an Emu. I emphasized walk because that's how it's shouted at times on the track. We'll close out this list with 2 men named Kim. First is Kim Pencil, who debuted with Pencil Sketches No. 1 in 1988. Kim is a one-man band on this album, playing everything on his keyboards. My favorite tracks are You Ready?, The Moroccan Junction, Khalida, and The Doctor Is Out, which has the feel of a news or sports music bed. We've reached the end of the decade, the end of the list, and our second Kim, saxophonist Kim Waters. His debut album was Sweet and Saxy. Also, that was the title. Of the 10 tracks, my favorites are Cruisin', not a cover, the title track, Where Can She Be?, Soul Serenade, a King Curtis cover, Stand By Me, a Benny King cover, and Don't Stop Now, which starts out with a talk track with Kim and his sisters. Kim's brother, James, plays bass on a few tracks, and in addition to sax and background vocals, Kim, along with Cyrus Chestnut, worked the keyboards. There you have it, 13 debut albums from the 1980s. Let me know in the comments below if any of those are in your collection. Until the next episode, thanks for watching. So long.